Okay, ready to get started, guys. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. My name is Meg. I am coming to you as part of the virtual hosting team with PowerToFly, and I am so excited to be chatting with all of you and can't wait to dive into this topic with our lovely guest speaker, Tamar. For those of you who don't know much about PowerToFly, you're welcome to take a look at our website. We've got a lot of really great things coming up and some really awesome resources that are free to our attendees, so please take a look at those. Before we get started, I am going to run through some quick housekeeping items. So the biggest thing for all of you to know is that as our attendees, today and all of our virtual events are always about you. So we highly encourage participation. We want to make sure that you all get as much out of today as we put into it. So to that end, you are more than encouraged to turn your cameras on, show us all your smiling faces. I know I really appreciate seeing new faces without masks. So please feel free to do that. Don't worry if you're not Insta perfect, or if you've got your dog next to you on the couch or your kid next to you because of homeschooling. Not a problem. We love these cameos, so please feel free to turn your cameras if you'd like. If you have any privacy concerns, not a problem. You can still turn on your cameras. We are recording and live streaming today's event to our website, but as long as you don't come off mute, you won't show up on the recording or the live stream. So no worries about privacy concerns there. If you do want to participate via audio and you're cool with coming up on the live stream and the recording, that's great. You are highly encouraged to come off mute to ask questions, add comments, or add context, especially if we're going over a question that you had previously submitted. So as we're doing that, if you either have audio issues or don't really want to come on camera or don't want to show up in the chat, that's fine, or on the recording, I'm sorry. You can also participate by writing any comments or questions that you would have into the Zoom group chat. If you are in serious, deep cover and don't want anyone to know that you are here and want your question raised anonymously or your comment, not a problem. You are still welcome to participate. You'll just select my name, Meg Alexander, from the drop down in the Zoom chat. Instead of sending your comment or question to everyone, you'll just send it to me. I'll make sure that your information or your question is raised and keep you anonymous. Like I had said previously, today is being recorded. So whether you spend 5 minutes with us or stay for the full 60, everybody that registers for today's event is going to be sent an email in about 1 to 2 business days, and it'll have a link where you can rewatch today's recording. So it's really great in that you don't have to take notes, you don't have to ask a question if you didn't quite catch what somebody had said. You can always go back and review it, and you can send and share that link to anybody that you'd like. So let's say something comes up and Tamar has a really great nugget of wisdom that you would love to pass on to one of your friends. You are more than welcome to share that link far and wide. If you don't want to wait for that rewatch email to come to you, not a problem. You can check out our YouTube channel. We are at PowerToFly, and you can check out the recording. Will be there pretty much as soon as we finish with today's session. So you're more than welcome to check it out there as well. I also highly encourage you to follow us on social as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is a great way to make sure that you don't miss any upcoming chats, even if maybe one slips by you and you don't get registered in time. That way you make sure that you know when we have live videos happening as well as when we post recordings, and it won't clutter up your inbox. So that's really kind of nice. There's also a ton of ways to keep up with us on social. We are at PowerToFly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So please feel free to follow us there. And if you'd like to share the love with PowerToFly, you're more than welcome to take video or audio video or photos as we go and share us on social media. Let all of your friends know that you are learning with PowerToFly today. Just be sure to go ahead and tag us at PowerToFly or use our hashtag PowerToFly. So as we get started, I'm going to introduce you to our speaker, and then we'll go over some of the questions that we're going to ask. And so it is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest today, Tamar. After over a decade of building software, first as an engineer and then as an engineering manager, Tamar felt it was time for her to set out on her dream to build her own startup. She decided to focus on simple scheduling for parents because family life challenges often get overlooked, and she believes it can be simpler, easier, and better. That's why almost a year ago, she started building Parent Scheduler, an app that helps caregivers coordinate and collaborate around kids' schedules. So welcome, Tamar, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. We're really excited to have you. So before we get going on the questions, I'm just going to stop here. We've got 2 slides of these. For some of our more type A joiners, prefer to take a screen grab here, but don't feel like you have to. I'll pause on this screen and then the next for a couple of seconds in case you want to take that screen grab. This is going to give you an idea of the questions that we're going to cover in today's chat. So we took all of those questions that y'all pre-submitted and we kind of condensed them, remove redundant questions, that kind of thing, and then arrange them into a conversational format. So we want to make sure that all of you feel as welcome as possible to participate today. So if we are going over a question, I'm going to skip to the next slide, so in case you want to take your screen grab of that one. If you want to add context to a question, or if something occurs to you and you want to ask it, please feel welcome to do so. The one thing I will say is try not to interrupt if Tamar or another attendee is speaking. Meanwhile, I get paid to fill the silence. So if I'm just kind of prattling on and you want to ask a question, please feel free to interrupt me. I literally, I want to make sure that we have as much room for all of you to speak as possible. To that end, make sure that if you are coming off mute to ask a question, you come off mute when you're actively speaking, you ask your question or comment and then go back on mute. You'll notice that I do this a lot throughout the presentation so that nobody has to listen to the bulldogs snoring under my desk, because audio quality is always something we try and keep in mind here. If I do mute you, it is not a rebuke. I won't do it in the middle of what you're talking about. It's mostly to make sure that background noise doesn't contaminate the audio either for our attendees or for the recording. So as we go through here, we're going to start with one of the first questions, which was one that was really came up a lot in our question bank as we were reviewing what you all wanted to know today. So Tamar, how can you start the conversation with your partner about the family scheduling so that it doesn't all fall on one person?
Yeah, so this is it's a great question and it's very common. So as part of the startup, I've been working on startup for a year, and I've spoken to hundreds of parents, and the vast majority of moms usually said that the hardest part is the communication with the partner. So this is really a general problem, something that many of us are dealing with. Now, in all of these conversations, I'd say there is this range that families fall in, families with 2 involved parents. The one end is where one parent, usually the mom, does everything, all of the pickups and drop-offs and scheduling and doctor appointments, all the things. And on the other hand, you have the families where the 2 parents are really sharing together and responsible together for the load. And most families fall somewhere in the middle. And what tends to happen in this middle is that the other partner, again, culturally and traditionally, and research shows usually the dad, they do share the practical load. So they do share the pickups, they do share the drop-offs, they do take doctor appointments, but the managing of the schedule almost always still falls on one parent, on the mom. And it's that extra mental load that is really weighing down. Like a lot of moms have described it as being anxious or worrying about it, whereas a lot of the dads I've spoken to, they don't necessarily even see it. So a lot of dads that I've spoken to, even though they do pickups and drop-offs, even though they are involved in the technical aspects of the schedule, they don't manage it. So they're like, oh, what's the problem? My wife just, when I do pickup, she just puts it in my calendar. And then I asked her to call me or text me to remind me so I don't forget, sometimes multiple times in the day. And then I speak to the mom and she's like, I get so anxious, and if I forget to text him, I worry. And it's that part. It's being the manager. It's having the responsibility, sole responsibility, feeling like you carry that responsibility for the schedule and for nothing being missed. That's often trivialized, and not only by the dads, but oftentimes by us as well, by the moms. We're like, oh, it's just me that's struggling with it. It should be easy. I don't know why I worry so much. But no, this is hard. And most parents who are the managers of the schedule alone do struggle with it. So my recommendation is, first of all, before you even start the conversation with your partner, start it with yourself. We tend to, like, in general, family chores are, transparent work, and that's starting slowly to change. But the management of it, we still trivialize it often internally. So first of all, like, acknowledge to yourself, this is hard. It would be easier if I could share the load. And then start the conversation and be specific, on how you need them to participate. The one thing I would add is that often dads I've seen in this conversation, a lot of times they get very defensive, because, you know, if they're being honest, and I've seen it, they do know to some level that they're not participating as much. So in order to have like a productive conversation on this, um, it's not about the accusation or how much we're doing more. It's about how can you engage in a way that we can both be responsible and can take some of this mental load off of me.
I think you're really right. I mean, it's very easy to, especially, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I definitely know that I do this where I'm trying to manage my schedule. I have 2 dogs, so trying to make sure, like, it happened to me literally yesterday, where I'm trying to get everybody like to the vet and make sure that cars are full of gas where they need to be, and make sure that I've balanced with my schedule with PowerToFly hosting. And it's one of those things that it doesn't take no time to do. So even though the tasks incrementally might only take like 3 minutes here or 5 minutes there, that time adds up. And it really is, you're right, it's that mental load of trying to balance everything and remember where you're supposed to be and remember to put things in your reminder calendar and all those things that really, it's work and it needs to be recognized. And I think you're absolutely right. That conversation can be so loaded because it's one of those things that kind of falls by the wayside when it's not an issue. And then when it is, you're already amped up because, like, usually because something happened, right? Like a pickup got missed or wires got crossed and 2 parents showed up to pick up a child at the same time. And so it's really emotionally fraught. And so you're already kind of amped up when you go to start this conversation, and it's just not a productive way to have that conversation. So if you're trying to do this in a proactive way as opposed to reactive, and you're trying to do it in a way that doesn't put your partner on the defensive, are there any tips or tricks for doing this? Like maybe laying out what you're doing well in advance to kind of show that this is what's going on? Or is it more about bringing in your partner on the actual planning stage to say, like, hey, I need help parsing through this?
I would say it's both. So I would say, start with like expressing how you feel. That's always a good start of conversation with your partner. Reflect back to them on why this is hard. And, yes, it's just 5 minutes for me to send you that text, but I have to remember and worry about it the entire day. And it adds up, just like you said. And then the second part of it is to be specific on, like, let's sit down together and plan this together. Let's plan the week. What I heard a lot of parents that do share more do is that at the beginning of every week or at the end of every week, they sit down and they plan together the next week, and everybody puts it in their own calendars. And then they also do reminders for each other. So that way you also, the mental load is not just the remembering and the doing, it's also the worrying. And when you get your partner to be more involved, then you need to worry less because they worry more, and just bring them in on the conversation and also on the technical part, like break it down and have that place where they can be a manager with you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know it's one of those things that feels very difficult to start. So thank you for those tips on how to, kind of broach that subject.
Yeah. And I would add, just like you said before, I've also seen families where that conversation only happens when, at the very end of, the emotional voyage, when you're super frustrated and you're super, like, you've kept inside all of this frustration, and then it kind of explodes and they get defensive and you feel like you're not getting help. So yeah, I also think this is also a really important point that you brought up of like, we need to recognize it before we get to a point where we're drowning, so we can engage with them and get their help earlier on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that actually leads us kind of nicely into the next question that was submitted. This person says, do you have suggestions for making sure that we stick to a schedule once we set it? Do you recommend baby steps for getting into the flow of a full-blown schedule, or is it an all or nothing thing? You should jump in with both feet.
So from the practical part, I would say, engage the entire family on building the schedule. Engage your partner for sure. Also engage the kids, and build the schedule together, plan it out, make it theirs as well, draw it out on a piece of paper. If the kids are small, when my daughter, before she could read, so she would do the little drawing of, this is the face of daddy and this is a lunchtime or a friend time. And then put it on the wall or put it on the fridge. I would also say, like, keep it simple, especially now if you're doing it's a schedule at home. Keep the schedule as simple as possible, both for them and for yourself, because it's easier to follow. If it has many steps and it's very elaborate, it's harder. How I like the boxes, the time slots that I use are like school time. That's like an obvious no-negotiable if they have remote study or if they go to school. And then there's screen time, there is free play time where they play by themselves, or she plays by herself, and there is parent time. And so the parent time, it doesn't have to be a lot. You can, because we have our restrictions and we have, the things that we need to get done. But even 30 minutes of undivided attention to your kid is super meaningful, and it also helps them through the less fun parts of the schedule, because they know that there's going to be this slot and it's going to be in this amount of time. Again, with the younger kids, you can even show them on the clock, when the big hand gets to this point, this is when we'll have time together. And then it helps them kind of through the less fun parts possibly of the schedule. And also, keep it flexible and see what works for your family. You can find a lot of awesome schedules online, or I can describe my specific schedule, but it doesn't mean it will be right for your family. So try out a bunch of things, see what works, but see what works for you first, because the kids are gonna complain and there's gonna be some pushback. So you can be flexible about it, but make sure you do stick to some sort of schedule. and not let them inch you back into chaos.
So you talked a little bit about, kind of introducing young kids to this idea, even if they are, very small. Is there ever a time where it's kind of too late to start, or is this something you should introduce, whether your kids are 5 or 15 or 18?
Wow. My child isn't 18, but I kind of find it hard to imagine I'll be able to tell her what to do. Even now, I struggle in telling her what to do. She's very opinionated. So obviously, it's harder to introduce once they've gotten used to one way. It's harder to change. You kind of have to be firm. They're gonna, even if they're young, they're gonna push back. Like I said, kids, they need this frame. It does really well for them. They get to rely on it, but they're also needed to push back against it and see what happens and how much you're willing to give. And they don't want to do this part, or they don't want to do that part. So you need to be firm. To an extent. I don't think there is a point in time where you cannot introduce. I think the older kids, they have their own schedule, and you can have more of a conversation. If you want to introduce a dinner time together, introduce it and have the conversation. It's very different. When you start younger, it's easier, but also it's a smaller type of schedule, because they can't really keep their own, you can't put a 2-year-old to play by themselves for an hour. That's just not gonna happen. So I think you can introduce it at a later time and expect some resistance. But again, you can introduce the fun parts of it as well. It's probably going to be like most families, if there is no schedule, it usually means a lot of screen time. And I'll talk about it a little more later as well about like how to now reduce the screen time. But I definitely think you can, and I think it's worthwhile. And I think they'll come to enjoy it and appreciate it. And, you know, by now, my daughter, now we have like the pandemic schedule, and my daughter already knows what it is, and just knowing what it is and having that routine and these steps and you know, when she's going to do this and when she's going to do that, just helps her, you know, be very calmer through the day.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're really, it's a good thing to kind of call out the pushback element, right? Because I think when I was asking the question, I was thinking more in terms of like, I have a friend who has, she's older than me and has children that are like 16, 17. And she still runs like their schedule when it comes to like their sporting events and all that. And all I could think was like, well, my parents didn't do that with me. I was expected, you know, because I was my own ride to my, you know, my activities and that kind of thing. Once I turned 16 and had a license and could drive. So I'm thinking like, especially with older kids, it's definitely something you want to make sure that they know how to do so that they can run their own schedule and maybe take some of the, you know, kind of join that position like your partner and take some of the lift off of you. You know, making them responsible for their own events and their own activities to a certain extent, obviously, would kind of help spread out that load as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think engaging with the kids and like drawing them into even the decision-making part, like obviously they don't get to decide how they run their day when they're younger. But having them join, it also feels good for them. They enjoy it. They feel like big when they're younger. But also, yeah, it teaches them that they need to be responsible. And I have spoken to some moms where, you know, the kids are older and she says, yes, you know, I expect them to go and input their schedule. You know, even if I then have to drive them, I still expect them to take responsibility, you know, and tell me what, if there's a special day at school or if there is an extracurricular and all of these things.
Yeah. All right. So this next person had asked, oh, and before we jump into the next question, I do just want to reiterate for everybody who's joining us, because I see we do have some new people that joined the call. Please feel free to come off mute and ask questions if you like, add comments into the chat or ask questions in the chat. So please feel free to, you know, kind of direct this conversation and direct our discussion with Tamar. So this person had asked, do you have suggestions around having your co-parent or spouse maintain the schedule in place when it's their time or their turn? I feel like if I'm on a call, my spouse doesn't even check the schedule and just puts our son on his iPad.
Yeah, so, you know, if I go back to my first answer on like how to start the conversation, how to get your co-parent involved, it sounds to me, just from this short description, you know, it very depends on the couple dynamic and your family dynamic and structure. But it sounds like perhaps the problem is that they are, again, in the role of not being the manager, of just being, you know, they get the schedule from you, and then they don't agree with it, or it's too much work. And then the iPad's always easier, of course. So, you know, here it's, I think the best approach would be to really, in an earlier stage, like get them involved in the schedule making, have a discussion about how much screen time do both of you feel is right for your child. And, you know, part of I spoke before about not being the manager, and it sounds great to offload this weight, but there's also the other side of like, you have to give up some of the decision-making power, because maybe I say 1 hour is really enough for a child or the age of our kid, and my spouse says, no, it's 5 hours. Like, I think 5 hours is fine. You know, you're both the parents and you're both the managers, and it's about having that discussion and maybe finding the boundary, what's the absolute like red line, no crossing, and also figure out what's really important for you in the schedule in this scenario. Is it too much screen time, or is it the child gets cranky afterwards? I know my daughter gets cranky after too much screen time. Or do they miss meals or naps, and then that has consequences. So figure out like what is the real crux of the problem that makes it difficult, and also convey that to your partner. Now, everything I said kind of relies on having an open channel of communication, but if we're on it, that's not always the case. Like sometimes there's no one on the other side that you feel like you can talk to. I mean, it's not ideal, but sometimes that's the case. And then I would suggest like you kind of have like either you go take this full on, you pick your battle. If this is the battle you want to take, then you take it on. But another option is to say, okay, I'm going to move my schedule. So screen time is when I have a call, and accept that this is, the screen time, and then other time is not. Or say that time with daddy is different with time with mommy. And we see it all over. Like I often see families where, the dinner that the other parent does on the evening that they're responsible for dinner is always pizza. And maybe you don't want it to always be pizza. And maybe you're also worried that if they always do pizza, then they become the fun parent. That's also a concern. But you know what? Kids learn very early on what they can get away with each parent. And it's also okay to have like slightly different behaviors and slightly different schedules with the different parents. So kind of, it really depends on your own family dynamic and your dynamic with your co-parent or the spouse.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, is to kind of flag the idea that identifying what the issue is or what the repercussions are. Like, you don't want your son to have 5 hours of screen time, but your husband or your co-parent or whatever thinks that they should. Identifying the negative results of that, like, well, he's going to be kind of a nightmare to put to bed that night because, here's what's happening. Sometimes it's just honest, like, people don't understand kind of the repercussions. Like, I don't think my dogs are equal to children, but this is the only frame of reference I personally have, where like treats are something that you really only give like once or twice a day. Whereas sometimes like my mom or my family or my friends will be like, oh yeah, they're being so cute, give them a treat. Well, if I'm the only one that's cleaning up the puke when they like, the treats are too much and it's upset their stomach, then of course nobody else is going to understand why we don't give them treats all the time, because yeah, they do look adorable all the time. So bringing people in on like why you do these things or what the actual repercussions are can be really helpful to, like you said, arriving at a better agreement between the two of you for what the optimal screen time is, or maybe when the screen time happens. And you're right, like kind of allowing for some flexibility in the schedule and allowing for, someone to be really frazzled and not really have time or not really have the attention span to do, whatever the activity was supposed to be. Being forgiving in that way can be really, really helpful for the relationship as well as for the child. There's somebody commenting in the chat saying my son acts out way more with his father than he does with me, and that's kind of a little bit telling of like who's maybe the fun parent versus the taskmaster, or who is seen kind of as the pushover. And maybe that's some way that you can kind of start the conversation. It's like, well, he does act out a lot more with you than he does with me. If that bothers you, here's the things I do, and maybe you could do something similar or come up with something that you're more comfortable implementing to like kind of fight that.
Yeah, my daughter, for example, doesn't argue with her dad hardly at all, but with me, oh my God, it's just from the moment she wakes up till the morning, the minute she goes to sleep, there's constant arguments. And that's okay too. This is her place to be angry sometimes with me and fight with me. And I also think that I sometimes try to also accept it, that this is her place to get her frustrations off. And it's okay, to have a different type of relationship with the different parents as well.
Yeah, I think that could be really important to remember and very hard to remember in the moment. I know I've definitely put my mom through a lot of the same kind of thing, and we have a wonderful relationship now, but there's a lot of times where she needed to have patience with me because I was horrible. Okay, so this person had kind of written in with a little along the same lines, saying, how can I limit screen time when I work from home these days and I'm in front of my computer all day? How can I limit screen time for our family? I feel like there were a lot of people that had questions like this, especially at the start of the pandemic, where you can't really say, well, just go outside. Because some countries and some people were in lockdown, like total lockdown. So are there other activities that you advise or other things that can kind of help limit that screen time?
Yeah, so I love this question. I feel like we all struggle with it, and I think it's a great question. So I think that there are some practical tips, like we tried like a jar. We write down all sorts of activities and then put them in the jar. And then when she's bored, she can pick one. Or another mom told me she did a board of activities. But in all of the cases that I've heard, it didn't work very well. So boredom is a state of mind in a way, so how can you limit screen time? It's not going to be easy. Screen time is easiest for everyone. It's not going to be easy for you, and it's not going to be easy for them. And it's a matter of decision. But the interesting part is that research shows that it's actually important for kids to be bored, that they whine and they cry and they will argue, but it gives them the opportunity to find out things about themselves, to get motivation from within. So, what I did at the beginning, there was no limit on screen time. Very quickly I understood, I need to limit it somehow, especially since my daughter gets very cranky with too much screen time. And then I just set, you have an hour of screen time and then you have an hour of free play. I think I mentioned it before. And she argues about this free play. Like, she still tries to get engaged with me or get me to tell her what to do. And all of my suggestions, she says no, because like I said, boredom is like, she will reject everything. I mean, I'm sure that, kids have rooms full of toys nowadays. They have so many activities they could do. But it's saying they're going to be bored now. And when my daughter came up and said, Mom, I'm bored, at some point after I read this research about the importance of being bored and how it's okay to let them be bored, I just realized, I don't have to solve it for her. We as parents, we're responsible for feeding them and caring for their physical health and emotional health and loving them, but we don't have to be their entertainers. We don't have to, when we take away the screen, we don't have to be the equally good alternative to the screen. And when she came up to me and said, Mom, I'm bored, at some point, at first I tried to offer this and that and engage with her. But then I started saying, great, that's awesome. It's really important to be bored. And she was like, Mom, and got upset with me. Like, stop being so annoying. But I stopped engaging. Like, I'd offer one or two things that she could do now. And then she'd reject them. And I was like, okay, so, go figure it out. And it requires more patience. Like I said, if you want to limit screen time, it will take some effort, both from the kids and from you. But if you're firm and, you see that it's hard for them and you do help them, you don't just, throw them in their room and figure it out yourself, but you can help them, okay, I'm happy to help you find something to do. I'll do 2 suggestions, or I'll help you for 5 minutes, otherwise it's just you playing with them and engaging with them. And then just let them, accept they'll be angry, they'll be frustrated, they'll be angry with you, but eventually they'll give up and they'll go and they'll figure out something to do. And it's actually like, I'm amazed every time, because then she goes and figures out something to do and it's cool and she does it for a while. And having that in a schedule really helps, because part of what helps her through this I have to play alone now, is knowing that afterwards she gets to play with me for a set amount of time. And then she might ask me every 5 minutes if it's time yet, and then I do the clock thing. But my biggest suggestion on limiting screen time is, first of all, accept that there's gonna be resistance because screen is easiest. And then, be firm in, I don't have to solve this for you. I see that it's hard. I'm willing to make a list of activities with you. Let's make a list of activities and you can pick one. But just let them be bored and see what happens. It's in general, like, I feel culturally, we're so used to solving problems. Oh my God, there's a problem, we have to go and solve it. And there is this alternative approach that says, just step back, don't solve it and see what happens. Don't make a decision. Don't solve the problem. Just wait. And it's really hard because we're not programmed this way, and culturally we don't practice this. Even in school, we're always expected to know the answer and to find the solution. But it's really like opening the space where it's just like, I don't know what my kid is going to do now, also gives them the opportunity to discover something new about themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a call, like a throwback to when you finally have to let your child like cry to so they learn how to self-soothe themselves. And it's got to be really hard, because I know that it was really difficult for my mom. It was really difficult for my sister, especially when she had my niece. But if you just think about it in kind of the same terms, it's like, well, if they're always looking to you to be sort of the cruise director of life, you don't want that to continue the entire time. You want to make sure that these are, they grow up into people who know how to amuse themselves. So yeah, really important thing to remember, so that kids don't just kind of rely on the parents and all of the never-ending either involvement or suggestions to kind of amuse themselves.
Right, because then they're in this constant state of just external motivation or external things that activates them. The TV is very engaging. You don't have to do anything. It just does all the excitement for you, or your parents do all the excitement for you, or your friends do all the excitements for you, and just creating a little bit of space. It's a voyage of discovery.
Yes, for sure. All right, so this person had asked, I'm working long hours, but my ideal day would include tutoring my kids, making them supper, playing with them, etc. From your experience, can both of these be done without outsourcing the time with my kids?
Yeah, it's another great question, because I've had like variations of this conversation, like I feel like so many times in the past few months, especially. I think that, so for every parent I've spoken to, it usually were different things that prevented them from being this ideal parent. Like everybody had this view of how they would be this ideal parent. And then you feel this constant disappointment and frustration for not reaching that bar that you feel like you should be there. So that frustration, it doesn't help us. It doesn't give us, it doesn't lead us forward. At the end of the day, there are your constraints. You have to work these long hours and you cannot do all of these things. There is this thing about, some of you probably heard it, like sane mom, clean house, or happy kids. You have to pick only two. You cannot get all the things done. So instead of trying to get everything and constantly feeling frustrated and guilty that you're not doing all of these, if you don't have the extra time, then you don't have the extra time. Like there is nothing to be done but accept the reality. But if you do have 1 hour a day, and you want to get all the things, you cannot get all the things. Pick one. Pick the one thing that you're going to do today in this 1 hour of extra time that I have. So today I'm going to play with the kids, and instead I'm going to order pizza because I won't have time to make supper. And accept it, and let the other things that you didn't get to, let them go. They're not they're not moving, they're not helping you. They're not contributing in any way. If anything, they just makes us more angry and have less patience. So instead, let all the things you cannot do go, and pick the thing that you can do, the one thing that you can do today, and just do that, and congratulate yourself for doing it and be happy that you got to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good advice on, making sure that you're not letting that picture in your head of how this should all look kind of ruin what you are accomplishing or how it is all turning out. Also a really good thing to, kind of realize that not all of these activities, fun time with your kids could also be something that happens while you're making dinner. Granted, it depends on the age of the child, but involving them in that gives you, more family time that doesn't have to be, focused on some other tertiary activity. So you're not having to come up with yet another activity to do with the family altogether, and you're, getting something done, and it's something for them because it's going to result in dinner, which is still some more family time. So yeah.
Yeah. And connecting that, by the way, to the previous question, what I sometimes do is like, I'm making food now, lunch, dinner, whatever. You can either join me or have free play. You cannot watch TV now. And that's one of the ways you can introduce less screen time. Like, here, I'm not in front of the screen. I'm making food. You should come help me. You don't want to help me? Okay, that's also fine. But then you have to occupy yourself.
Yes, very good. There's one person asking in the chat, do you focus on impact lists or to-do lists or something like that? Or is that maybe adding another layer of scheduling to, or kind of another layer of tasks to this scheduling idea?
So I'm not sure if it's like to do for me or for the child, but I'll answer both. I personally don't have a to-do because I just roll with the day. But also people are different. Again, I've spoken to so many parents, and different things work for different people. And on that same note, different things also work for different kids or don't work for different kids. So, whatever works for you and your kids, that's great. And what doesn't, then don't do it. If you find that your child works amazingly with to-do lists, and you create a to-do and they have super fun time just going through the chores and marking them off, then that's awesome. And if they don't, then they don't. If it's something that helps you, then definitely incorporate it. And if it's not something that helps you, like, you don't have to do it. I don't do it, but that's me.
Okay. So moving on to one of the other questions that we were asked. Hold on, make sure you pick the right one. This person had wanted to know, what's been the hardest thing to input into your schedule? Self-care time, exercise, etc. Because obviously it never seems to be enough hours in the day anyway. So what's that one thing for you, at least, that's the hardest to include?
So I think, speaking generally, there are two things that are hard to input into our days. One is the things we don't really want to do. So for me, it's cleaning. I find it so hard to find time for cleaning. For other people, it might be exercise or, all the things we don't want to do. But the other thing that's generally hard, and especially for women, to put into the schedule is self-care, is me time, is prioritizing your things. For some people, exercise is self-care. Whatever energizes you. We are so used to, culturally, we're used to like deprioritizing our needs. But what I've seen is that when you prioritize your needs and insist on putting that slot that's for you, coffee with a friend, pandemic allowing, or going out for a walk, even if it's half an hour or an hour, everybody benefits from it. Because when you don't prioritize your own time, then you're less patient and you get more frustrated. And so even with your partner, and I've also encountered where like the partners have pushback on your alone time. What do you mean? You're going to do some self-care or going to just hang out and watch a show, why are you doing this? There's so much to do. Also reflect back and say, this is super important. If you don't want a super cranky partner, you will let me have this 30 minutes walk for myself. So really make sure that you prioritize your self-care. We're so accustomed to just deprioritizing that.
Absolutely, very true. I know that especially when I first started working from home, I tried to make sure that I had like a good balance of like work and my home life, which was odd because like you're working from your house, you don't have that like decompression time of a commute. And especially after the pandemic started, I had more of a hard time than I think I'd had when I transitioned to working from home initially 2 years ago, because it felt like there was not anything else really in the outside world to go and do. And so my work life bled into the rest of my home life to the point that I'm, working till 7 o'clock. And yeah, there's things to do, but you're right. It's one of those things where you don't really prioritize yourself. You think of like, okay, well, I'll just make myself a sandwich and eat it at my desk instead of like stopping, going and having dinner, making sure that you're like taking care of yourself well and not just doing the bare minimum to make sure that you're living day to day.
Well, you get burned out.
Oh yeah.
When I do that, when I have super intensive days, I'm less productive. Even just talking about work, when I have super intensive long days, then the next day I'm not as productive. So, it burnout is real, and we also need to manage that. And it's also real in the family context.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so this person had asked, do you ever schedule empty time into your calendar on a monthly basis for things that just might come up? Or is this sort of eating away at time that you could use for other things to free up the time when you actually need it?
So I haven't done it myself, but I also haven't heard that from other parents. And I love this. I think this is a really cool idea. I'll definitely give it a try. Like I haven't done it. I haven't heard anyone done it. I think it's very cool. I mean, if you don't need the time, then you can always, there's always stuff to do. I'm sure you'll find something. But I think it's a great idea to put on some empty time. What I would say is like, the whole scheduling of time, whether it's like time with your kids or time for yourself, put it on the calendar and treat it like a meeting. The same way you wouldn't pick up your phone now that you're on a meeting and start answering emails, treat those other activities as in the same way. If you're with the kids, be 100% with your kids. If you're having some me time, have 100% of me time, and like do those slots. Make sure you give them, like, don't let all the other things just take them away.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's one of those things that, like we talked about really early on, you have to keep in mind that some things actually take longer than you'd really like them to. And maybe start with a schedule from a very realistic point of view instead of that aspirational, like, well, it should only take us 5 minutes to get shoes on and out the door. Okay, but if it actually takes you 25, maybe start from that and then see, maybe if part of the schedule, if the reason it takes 25 is because like maybe shoes aren't all put away or you don't know where you're going. And so you have to like last minute, sit in the car and look up where you're going and what the directions are, that kind of thing. They think that that's one of those situations that if you start with actually where you are, there's always room to kind of keep improving and building more towards the goal. But you're not setting yourself up for failure by saying, okay, well, we have 5 minutes. That's what's on the schedule. That's how long it should take. Well, if you're setting yourself up for failure, then the rest of your day is going to feel off because you're already, going to have to eliminate something else from the schedule, let something go. And it feels less like a successful implementation of a new way to go through your day.
Yeah. And transitioning with kids always it's always frustrating and long. Like, there is no way, even after my daughter is ready with shoes and her bag on her, it will not take us 5 minutes to leave.
Absolutely.
For sure. Things take longer, always.
All right. So we've only got about 10 minutes left in today's chat, but I just wanted to call out one question that kind of kept coming up for a lot of the parents, or a lot of the parents of school-age children, saying, from a scheduling point of view, is there a way I can schedule fun time into my kids' virtual school environment to help minimize the amount of temptations they see online while focusing on school?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, from a practical, some tips I've seen that work really, really well in families is you can make the lunchbox at the beginning of the day and then have a set snack time. Otherwise, often snack time becomes a way of like, oh, I'm not going to do homework because I'm hungry now, and that becomes, a way of not doing your work. So have like 10:30, we're going to have a snack, and you prepared it in the morning so you don't have to stop. They can go and pick their box and have their snack. And then, like I said before, it really helps to have this fun thing to look forward to. When I finish all of these chores or these tasks or this homework, I can spend like half an hour watching a show, for example. I have spoken to a dad, and that is really depends on your family and what's right for you. And they actually do, like, if you finish all your chores or your schoolwork for the week, then we do a trip to the ice cream shop. And if you get all of your work for the month, then we do like a whole picnic or something. I don't remember the specific. So, it's not right for all families, but that's another thing. But on a higher level, I think what's really interesting is in this scenario that we're now all facing is that this is a real preparation for adult life. I mean, you spend all day in front of the computer. How do you avoid temptations? This is preparing them for that point where, yes, they'll have chores, they'll have work, they'll have things they need to do. And how do they avoid the temptations that on the computer are so available? So it's an unexpected challenge that we're facing, but we can also take like a perspective on it and say, we can actually treat it as like a preparation for life. And what I personally really like to do with my daughter is actually share with her on like eye level what I do. So first of all, I do have some temptation time. I do go sometimes and browse Facebook or, whatever, read the news. It's okay to also not be focused the entire time. And then how do I get myself to do the things and avoid temptations? So if they're old enough, you can also have the conversation with them. And it really helps them when they feel like, oh, my mom or my parent also has this problem, and we can share and we can talk about how hard it is, and we can share tips on how to avoid it, and really treat it as almost like a learning opportunity to how to manage these temptations, because they're going to deal with them later in life when they're adults.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so we only have about 6 minutes left in today's chat. The one thing I did want to take a break to touch on is your parent scheduler app. So let me pull this page up so we can see and see if there's, I'd like to, kind of give you this opportunity to tell us a little bit more about what you've come up with and how it can work for some of our attendees.
Yeah, so what I've tried to focus on is, like I said at the beginning, it's the mental overload of the communication. So in the app, it's a calendar-like app. You can put in activities, and you can also put a pickup or a drop-off and assign it to the caregiver. And what it does is that when you get the reminder that you have pickup in 30 minutes, when you say, yes, I've got this, the other parent will get notified. So they know that you remember. Because what I hear so much, what I see so many of us struggle with, is that extra overhead of making sure that they remember that text that I have to send. So it syncs with Google. And, if you have other feedback, also, please feel free to reach out. There's also a to-do list in there. So yeah, that's the app. It's free to use.
That's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So as we wind down today's chat, is there anything that you want to make sure that you leave our audience with, or anything that you wish we had asked about or wish we had talked about that maybe we didn't cover today?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, especially now, it's really challenging. Everybody's soldering, everyone I speak to. This is challenging time, and being a parent is challenging in general. And I think the most important thing that I really want to give almost every parent I talk to is being more generous with yourself. even if you didn't get to do the playtime with the kids, and even if dinner wasn't great, and even if you fought and had, a major breakdown through the day, don't carry that guilt or that sense of frustration, and just be kind to yourself first and foremost, because these are really challenging time. Being a parent is a really challenging thing, and that's, I think, is one of the most important things. I wish I was told, and I wish I could tell everyone as well. Just be kind to yourself.
Thank you for that. I think you're right. That's one of the things that we definitely overlook from time to time. Well, Tamar, I know we've got just a couple minutes left as we wrap up, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us and share some of your amazing advice, as well as your parent scheduler app. And thank you so much for addressing these questions from our community. Is there anything else that we can touch on before we leave?
This was really awesome, and thank you so much for having me. And I hope the people listening in also enjoyed it. And feel free to reach out and connect and have more questions if you have, for sure.
Yeah. So I put a couple links into the Zoom chat where y'all can check out. You can connect with Tamar on her LinkedIn. There's also a link to the Parent Scheduler app website, as well as a link where you can check out some of our upcoming PowerToFly live chats. Just to call out to anybody that's interested, tomorrow we're hosting a session on why voting is important and how to do it from abroad. The 16th, so this coming Friday, is going to be our virtual job fair day. So please feel free to join us for that. It's going to be wonderful. I'll be hosting one of the rooms, and there's a lot of really great companies attending that you can check out. And then starting next week, we've got chats about how to break your own glass ceiling, how to start 2021 on a strong financial footing, moving overseas and what some of the tax impacts are about that, as well as chats with a trans ally, an LGBTQ expert, to talk to us about pronouns and what do's and don'ts are out there for trans allies. So please feel free to join us for some of those. We really appreciate all of you attendees who came today, especially the great questions you submitted in advance, as well as the amazing questions and comments that were put in the chat. So as we wind down for today on Wednesday, I'm just really looking forward to seeing more of you on upcoming chats, and hope that you enjoyed today's session. Thanks so much, Tamar, and thank you to all of our attendees.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.